thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me, Hannah. Please tell us your name, a little bit about your family of origin, your background, maybe how you came to Nevada, and your education.
Okay, I'm Hannah Brown, and I've lived in Las Vegas since I was 6 years old. My mom came here in 1945, and as I said, I was six. My mother was born and raised on a farm in Arkansas and married at age 22 and had three of us girls. She actually had four. The oldest girl was stillborn, but she had three live daughters. And when I was a year old, my mom decided that she didn't want to starve to death on a farm in Arkansas. So she took two little kids and went to Arizona to look for work. And she wandered around in Arizona and found medial work for a while and realized that it was very difficult for her to navigate with two little kids. So she sent my sister and I back to Arkansas after 2 years and to live with my grandparents until she gained footing. She moved from Arizona to Reno and worked in a brothel for a very brief period of time, but my mother as a maid, not as one of the girls naturally, but my mother was so spiritual that she could not, with a clear conscience, continue to work in that environment. However, she would tell you that she made more money there than she'd ever made in her life because the ladies liked her, and I understand why, because my mother was very ambitious. She was, I always say, she was a neat freak, so I'm sure everything was met their,
Spick and
if
span.
not exceeded their expectations. But she did that for a very short while, and then she moved from Reno to Las Vegas, went to work in the pantry at the El Rancho Vegas. And at that time, the only two hotels in Las Vegas was the El Rancho Vegas and the Old Frontier. She worked there for I don't know how long, to be honest with you, but when she left the El Rancho Vegas, she started to work as a maid for some of the women that she had met at the hotel. And that's basically what she did until her death.
Where did you go to school and what did you study?
I actually went to grade school on the West Side at West Side School, West Side Grammar School. And when I grew up here in Las Vegas was segregated. So all of the black people lived on the West Side. And the West Side at that time was a mile and a half square. It was from A to H Street and from Bonanza to Harrison. And we all lived and coexisted on the West Side. I went to West Side School through my 8th grade year. And because our grade schools then were from kindergarten to 8th grade, and then once you were in the 9th grade, the high school was from 9 through 12. And I had a great time in school though. I loved school. I was on the honor roll, so teachers like smart little kids. So I had a great time in school. I look forward to going to school. And I never will forget. We all look forward to summer. We look forward to breaks. And 2 days after the break, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm ready to go back to school again." Because I missed school and my friends, and because we all loved recess too. It doesn't matter how much you enjoyed the classroom, you enjoyed recess. And when
That's most kids' favorite subject is
most
recess.
kids' favorite subject, and it was
They
mine
don't call
as
it
well.
recess anymore. They call it nutrition.
I know, yeah, well, yeah, and they should, because I don't think the kids get enough exercise now. But I can remember we'd go out of the classroom and we came back in, especially when it started to get warm, and we were sopping wet because in that 15 or 20 minutes that we were outside, we played like heck. And when we came back in, we needed a little break, from the heat. But when I graduated from the 8th grade, I went to Rancho High School because it was the first year that Rancho was a school, And it was too funny because probably 5% of the school was black. And back then, it was black, white, and a handful of Mexicans. And when about, oh gosh, I guess a couple months after school started, one of the girls that had befriended me said, Hannah, you should run for class office. I mean, for student body office. And I froze in my tracks, and I'm like, there's no way I would get elected. And she said, oh, yes, you will. I'll be your campaign manager, and you'll get elected. And she was my campaign manager. I don't know whether she threatened their animals, whether she threatened their families, or whatever, but I beat the socks off that kid I ran against. So I became a student body officer at Rancho High School, and it was fun for me because I enjoyed high school. So needless to say, I stayed on the honor roll. I was secretary of the honor club, and it was just all fun for me. And after my freshman year, Rancho was the district rezoned, and I attended Las Vegas High from my sophomore year through my senior year. Of course, my life changed a little bit when I went to Vegas High, because all the kids that had parents of prominence or money were at Vegas High, so you knew you weren't going to be a class officer. But I did continue to belong to clubs in the school, different little organizations, and became president of the FHA and
What is FHA?
Future Homemakers of America. Now that was not really my calling, but it was. I took home economics, so needless to say, it was kind of natural to get in FHA if you were female.
Right. It was the era.
Yeah, it was the era, and so anyway, that was fun. That turned out to be fun for me. I had a neat experience, interesting experience though, as president of the FHA, when we had a little conference in northern Nevada, and we all had to bring our little deposits to go on the bus and to pay for our room in Reno, because the conference was at one of the smaller towns outside of Reno. I can't remember which town it was.
Not Carson City.
Not Carson City. No, I'm familiar with Carson City. But anyhow, when we got to Reno, it was cold. And we were all on the bus, and, Mrs. Stuckey, who was our homeroom teacher, our home economics teacher, went inside. She never came back. Finally, the girls started complaining that they were cold. And I said, well, let me go in and see what's going on. So I went inside the hotel, and Mrs. Stuckey said, Hannah, go back and get on the bus. So I went back and got on the bus because, needless to say, innocence is truly bliss. And the next day or so, one of the girls was telling me, because we'd stay up and we'd fix each other's hair before we went to bed, and she said, they didn't want, the reason Mrs. Stuckey was in there so long is the hotel didn't want you to come to stay at the hotel. And I guess she finally just put her foot down and said, if she can't stay, we'll have to take the bus back to Las Vegas because she's a part of our group. So to top it off, when I gave the presentation for our club, and when I walked out on the stage, the little girl started snickering, and I was, needless to say, my stomach went crazy. And I finally got up enough courage to give our presentation, and we wound up winning first place. So that was payoff. But that was one of my most interesting experiences in high school. And, of course, being kids are so resilient, it took me like maybe 30 seconds to get past that. And then you go on to the next thing. But I thoroughly enjoyed school. And I worked all the way through school from a kid. I started work when I was a little kid, so I was working as a sales girl for a record store named Larry's Music Bar, and Larry had the longest term business. He was the longest term black business person in Las Vegas. But I worked through high school for him, and after high school as a young adult until I started working for Western Airlines as a reservation sales agent. And I did that for a very short while. And once I learned everything in the office, I started complaining about how bored I was. And finally, my manager, after about 9 months, said, well, you know, I think I can get you in a position at the ticket office, which was customer contact. And that was basically where my background was. So that fit a lot more with my personality and what I would enjoy doing. So I worked as a ticket agent in the city ticket office for many years. But after a couple years, I applied for a supervisor's position, and in the past, we had a union. So the only requirement to be a supervisor was to have good attendance and to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, and you were granted the position if you had the highest seniority. And when I filled out the paperwork for the position, they made me take a test. So of course I passed that stupid test, and I worked as a supervisor at the ticket office until they closed all of the offices. Then, of course, I went back to the airport. I went to the airport to work on the ticket counter for the first time at the airport.
The McCarran Airport.
Yes, and when so when the supervisor's position became available, I filled out the paperwork to be considered for that position, and there again we had another challenge. They made me take another test. So of course I passed that test. And you can believe, though, after that, everybody that filled out paperwork for a supervisor took that damn test, because I wasn't going to be the only person on the payroll that took that test. And after...
Was the environment, I'm getting the implication that they gave you the test because you have African ancestry.
I would think so, because no one else had taken the test.
And so you were in an environment that was almost exclusively Caucasians and you.
Oh, it was. Yes. It was, not almost. It was.
You were the only not Caucasian there.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was the first female and the first African American to work on the Las Vegas ticket counter as a supervisor for a major airline. So it was
difficult.
It was very difficult. You know, the thing is, looking back, it was more difficult than it actually was.
I understand.
Because when you're navigating through waters, you just sort of you make up your mind you're going to sink or swim.
Well, you just do the next thing that's in front of you, even though you may be pounded with obstacles. Yeah. You're not so focused on the totality of the obstacles so much as the current obstacle.
Exactly. And so you keep stepping. And one of the things I had to my advantage is I loved ticketing. I loved people. So I became very efficient in the area in my work area, and I was very good with the passengers. So that I had working to my advantage, and people kind of have to leave you alone a little bit when you're the top producer and your customers are happy with you.
I noticed from the paperwork you sent me that you ended up in an executive position. Can you tell us about that, please?
I did. When Delta purchased Western, I was the only African American and the only female manager that Western Airlines had. Well, of course, that exceeded what Delta had, so they were pretty pleased. they were
I was the only one, and that exceeded the other guy.
Yeah, that exceeded the other guy. But they were pretty pleased to have someone that was tried and proven, and they didn't have to train me. I was already trained. So
you just had to learn their software. Or
I just had to learn their software, which was very similar to ours, and learn a little bit. And it doesn't matter that they're both airlines. You had some culture, some cultural changes, that the differences that you had to adjust to. But I was pretty doggone pleased. We'd gone through the late 70s and early 80s when all of the airlines were afraid they were going out of business or go broke right on the spot. So I was pretty pleased to be working for a carrier that had money, so it was easy for me to make the transition. Well, needless to say, with Delta being the surviving carrier, all of the Western managers became assistant to the Delta manager. And a lot of our men, who were obviously all white men, were a bit affected by that because you know how
They
there,
had been a manager, now they're an assistant manager.
and they had we
Their
lost
egos were hurt.
we lost a lot of them, and it was fine with me
They
because
all
they
went to
gave
like
me
United or Continental like
yeah
that.
they gave me a pay rate. No, they didn't. A lot of them went out of the industry because you know we were in an